Vice President Kamala Harris accepting the Democratic Party's nomination for President of the United States. It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done. Guided by optimism and faith, to fight for this country we love, to fight for the ideals we cherish, and to uphold the awesome responsibility that comes with the greatest privilege on earth, the privilege and pride of being an American. Nicole.
The speech did so many things, and I think there was some incorrect analysis out there that she somehow had to pass a commander-in-chief test. She's the sitting vice president. The Wall Street Journal reported on her vital role in helping with that hostage release. Big effort from the Biden-Harris administration. I think what she did tonight was disqualify Donald Trump from ever being the country's commander-in-chief. She said this: fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important election in our lives, it's the most important in the life of our nation. And you take her speech and you take some of these lines from former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, who said every president since World War II, Republican and Democrat, has shared the belief that America must protect democracy in the world. Every president has honored our veteran sacrifices, every president but one. And you add Adam Kinzinger and Congressman Ruben Gallego, and their indictments of Donald Trump's disrespect and disregard for members of the military, especially those who have been injured or died in service to the country. They were scathing. They were elevated on this biggest stage in American politics. And I think they closed the door in the minds of anyone watching on Donald Trump ever passing the commander-in-chief test again.
When she said, as commander-in-chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families. I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. That is something that should not be an applause line in any speech. It should be an axiom. And yet the room erupted at that moment because of the contrast that she is drawing just by saying that with Donald Trump.
Well, count me among the unsurprised. My experience listening to Kamala Harris began when tonight's host of the convention, Kerry Washington, said to me, would you like to meet the female Obama? This was in 2009, in the first months of the Obama presidency. And we went along with Reggie Hudlin, who has produced some of the films that are in this convention, to a Century City law firm, about, 20 people, listening to the San Francisco district attorney. And it's one of those moments that it's clearly a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I was sitting there realizing I am seeing the first black woman president, no question about it. And what I saw that day was what she summarized when she said what we stand for toward the end of the speech. She said what we stand for: freedom, opportunity, compassion, dignity, fairness. That was all in that room that day with about 20 people listening to her, along with her strength, her wisdom, and an ability that is describable as nothing other than star power. It's a Hollywood phrase, but it's a real thing every once in a while, where there's someone who just, has all the resume stuff, and then there's this other thing, and it's that star power. And so what I have seen when people have thought she's not as good as they expect her to be, what I was seeing was she's not in the right spot. She doesn't have her footing in a way as vice president that you get to have now as a presidential candidate. This is the person who I saw the first time I heard her speak.
Let's go to Jacob Soboroff on the floor in Chicago, presumably buried under balloons, but let's see. Jacob.
Pretty close, Rachel. Pretty close. The message from my vantage point, which is a pretty close one, could not have been any clearer. A harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us.
Yes.
Kamala Harris for the people versus the only client Donald Trump has ever had is himself. And it's pretty amazing. This is what Kamala Harris and her family are seeing right now. Take a look. And then take a look back this way. I just want to give you a look as they start to walk off the stage. Look at the Secret Service agent, by the way, literally buried in balloons. It couldn't be a more different atmosphere than we had about a month ago at the Republican convention just down Lake Michigan. It's an ecstatic environment in here. That is one very big, happy family on that stage, you guys.
Alex and Joy are there on the convention floor. What are you seeing? What has this been like?
Welcome to the balloonery.
Yeah, we got some.
We got balloons, man.
Got it. We got into it. They got into the space.
How was the speech in the room? How was it?
Big. Can I say, like, you guys can see the flags in New York, but the amount, we've talked a lot over the course of the last couple of days about how Democrats are trying to reclaim patriotism, and I really feel like it culminated in this night. I mean, there are these gigantic flags. There's a Chicks singing the Star Spangled Banner. There's this thesis that I think came into sort of full flower tonight with Kamala Harris making the argument that the true strength, the true integrity, the true patriotism lies in the Democratic Party. And they have opened the flaps of the tent to encompass Republicans, to encompass doubters, to encompass people that felt culturally divorced from the party for decades. And here we have, I think, one of the broadest, deepest, most diverse coalitions I've ever seen. Yeah. All of them marching under the Stars and Stripes. It's really something else. This is a Democratic convention.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think listening to that speech, I was actually especially glad, even gladder than I was when I got down here, that I was here with this lady.
Yes, Mother.
Because, you know, America is, if anything, it is a magnet. It is a magnet that no matter where you are in the world, whether you're in the Congo or in Guyana, this is a lady whose mom came all the way from Asia, all the way
from Burma,
Burma.
Southeast Asia, where Burma was once part of the, British India.
Yeah.
Where Kamala's mother was from herself, and you, Joy.
We're literally like the physical, like embodiment of the ingredients that made Kamala Harris, and I love that we experience this together. Because what that magnet, the thing that draws people like my parents who came from very distant continents too, from Africa and from and from Guyana, is this idea that once you come here, what you make, what you create with the family that you develop, you make Americans.
Yep.
We are an embodiment of that, and Kamala Harris literally is. When I look on that stage and I see her family that are brown and that are black and that are this mix, this amazing admixture, and you look at Tim Walz's family, that is also part of the magnet. It's people from the Midwest and the Rust Belt and from California and from anywhere. But no matter where you're from, whether you're Adam Kinzinger or Nancy Pelosi, you are America.
Yeah, and you're also part of the Democratic Party.
And apparently you're part of the Democratic Party.
Or at least you're voting for Kamala Harris.
Right, and the bottom line is what the Democratic Party has achieved is they've actually figured out a way to be an embodiment as a party of what America is supposed to be. Well done, and I think that she's embodied that tonight. Her speech gave that. She said, everywhere I go, everywhere I meet, I see a nation ready to move forward.
I know our moms. Wherever they are very happy.
Down.
I know my Asian mom, your mother are very happy, not just that Kamala Harris is the nominee, but that we get to be at this special place together.
Absolutely. I picture in my mind that Philomena and Shamala are literally dancing it out right now, because her mom reminds me a lot of my mom.
Yeah.
A lot. Even the food is similar, because the Indians and the Guyanese, they both like the curry and the roti and thing.
And the Burmese and the Indians. We could do a whole nother segment.
We're going to do a food segment next, guys. Stop us before we go on about food.
No, actually, I'm here for it, so it's fine. I've been trying to get everybody to eat jerky here the whole night, and it's not going well. So if you guys can bring something better into the mix, that'd be good. Let me ask you about one line in Vice President Harris's speech. I just want to get your take on how it resonated in the room. For us, watching this mediated through television, it seemed like it was almost a gasp and a big response from the room. She said, as part of his agenda, talking about Trump, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress, and get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, she said, they are out of their minds. And it felt from here
huge
like there was
reaction.
an eruption at that moment. But what was it like in Chicago?
Yeah, it definitely caused a collective gasp in this arena. It was a piece of information that I don't think that I had really heard in that specificity before.
Yeah.
We've heard sort of, and there's been a lot of Project 2025 talk.
A lot, but not with that specificity. And
Yeah.
they have woven reproductive choice through every, I would say, hour of this
Yeah.
convention. But this was the first time where Kamala Harris put some detail on it in that way. And I think much like, many people watching at home, a lot of the audience in here had no idea that that is the kind of draconian level Orwellian policy that is being proposed by the future Trump administration.
Well, and I'll throw in that in addition to really focusing on, it's interesting. Women were so present in this convention in a way they were absent in many ways in the Republican National Convention because they were really trying to avoid the whole abortion conversation. But it isn't just on reproductive rights. The idea of mom, of mommy, of motherliness really has been woven throughout this campaign. Through this convention, whether it was Michelle Obama talking about losing her mom, and whether it was any of the many women who are talking about the choice to be a mom, having to be your own choice, the choice on how to create families, and the way they've described family and mothers, I think has been very unique and interesting, as well as the way they've defined manhood and masculinity.
Yeah.
It's a really modern sort of conception of the family. I still can't get over Tim Walz's son. I'm sorry. Like I literally just that moment I think is still sticking with so many people. But between that moment and this night of hearing Kamala Harris and her sister Maya talk about their mom, I definitely feel like this was an embrace of motherhood by choice. And motherhood, whether it is a stepmom or whether it's a blended family, but I feel like that was another sort of sub-theme in this.
There are a lot of kids who have been on stage tonight, whether stepchildren, nieces, goddaughters, little kids, older kids, big kids, the idea of sort of generational inheritance and not just what kind of choice you have in terms of having children or not, but what kind of world you are leaving those children. Has been I think almost a subtext of the proceedings here tonight.
Well, that and the fact that all of the families you've seen here are so warm and loving and tactile and very different from what you saw at the RNC, where it felt more sort of clinical and sort of quasi.
That's being generous, I would say. I'm not sure that I would call what I saw a family, I mean, they have the same last name, but there's a lot of distance between the members.
It felt cold and it felt angry and it felt, that convention felt like constantly just talking about threat and talking about Democrats as a threat and sort of anger and, kick out all the immigrants and deport them all now. This convention felt like a party, a family reunion. And the family reunion has then led to balloons, many
100,000 balloons, like all family reunions.
All right, you will remember where you were when you heard this speech tonight from the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, really introducing herself to the nation, speaking as much to Republicans and independents as she was to the Democrats who were nominating her tonight, asking Americans to remember how great their country is and to fight for its values. You're going to remember where you were on this night. This is an inflection point in history. Ari, we haven't asked you yet what you thought of the speech. What was your take?
For years, we've known her as the vice president.
Yep.
Tonight, America got to meet her for the role she's actually played most of her career, as she said, representing the people. It was a home run of a speech, and what we heard was her give the opening statement.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's what she did. Here's who I am. Here's where I come from. That's my opening of my values and who I am. Then she made the case, and she made it, as some of our experts also said, more directly, more bluntly against Donald Trump than we've heard throughout this inclusive and joyous convention. And I think she needed to do that because that's what candidates do. And so for all the joy, she hit him hard. Note legally, she spoke about January 6th, democracy, fraud. She also made a point to say something that's legally true, that he has been found legally liable for sexual abuse. That is something that fewer people have said from the main stage. That, again, is the Kamala Harris we know from being the tough prosecutor. She's the right person to say it. And then third, we got the closing argument. And that broadened back out to, we can do this together. I'm proud to be American. We're not going back, which we've heard before. And so we got in each of those chapters what you would get from her in the courtroom, and she's good at it.
Steph, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just say one other point is that if you have heard her before and you follow the some speeches she's been giving, some of it sounded familiar. But this had to be done in this way because most people at home are not watching as closely as we are.
Yeah.
They have not heard her. And so there was stuff that harkened back to things that I had heard her say when I worked for her in the vice president's office, things that she said in her first presidential campaign, things that if you go and you look up speeches and things that she'd given in the United States Senate, like this was a speech that pulled from every single piece of her career, all of the paths that she had walked up until this moment. And I will say, she also wasn't wearing white. There were lots of folks that were wearing white tonight. When I was down there at the convention, they talked about wearing white, and Fannie Lou Hamer, this moment, the history. Vice President Harris is somebody that is not enamored with the history that she could potentially make. She's been the first in many of the things that she's done throughout her career. To me, her choice of what to wear today also said that I am about my business and that there's still work that needs to be done. And we're going to wear the white if we win.
What's interesting, when you look at the whole speech, it's like as she goes through it, she responds to her critics, right? So when you're hearing her background, and to your point, people could say, well, I heard that. What are you going to do? She then walks you through national security, foreign policy. And then when she's taking you back to January 6th, the critic who's saying, well, that's history, then she takes you forward and says, we will be guided by optimism and faith, and we're going to fight for it. So those people are leaving the room with an assignment of what they're going to do next, as opposed to the RNC. The RNC was basically like an inauguration celebration. Okay?
Totally.
They were like, we won this, we got this, let's go home, we're in charge now.
Totally.
People didn't leave the RNC with an assignment. They left the RNC like, well, we got it now. Everyone who's watched or participated, my phone is filled with people tonight saying, I am charged up, let's go do this thing. And we heard this assignment from Michelle Obama, from Oprah Winfrey, and from Vice President Harris tonight, and that's where they appear to be going
the
for the
number
next
of people
70 days.
looping back to Michelle Obama's speech saying, do something. As Michelle Obama said, do something, do something. That's not the tagline they intended for the convention, but it landed. That speech was such a knockout. And it landed as her in sort of insistent call and response moment in that speech. That actually is a great thing for people to be able to take away with them as they go home.
I also just to linger on what you just said, Simone, I think it's pretty wild to think about, right? We saw the way that Barack Obama extremely deftly navigated, I mean, at a level that will be written about for 100 years hence, right? About the politics of race and becoming the first black man to be president of the United States. Even the line, like, they said it couldn't be done. It's like, well, what's it?
What is
right? But he never says it. He just says, they said it couldn't be done. It's like, okay, we get it. There was nothing in the speech tonight. If I'm not mistaken, nothing.
It's very smart.
Not one word, not one allusion, not a hint, not anything about the epic history that would be made by Kamala Harris being the president of the United States. Not a wisp of it. And
very smart.
Even more than Obama, who was much more wink, wink, nudge, nudge about it. That they, this was like about my business. This was like none of it.
But this was, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I heard you saying is, everybody can wear white. That's
Everyone
fine.
knows it,
Everybody
right.
can talk about what this means for history and looking back and everything. But the way we're going to make history here is by me becoming president.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you I can be president by the fact that I basically already am president in some ways. I am vice president. I'm doing the work. This is what a president looks like. I'm going to make this as easy as possible for you to imagine because I'm already living it and doing this
Rachel is my translator.
Okay.
That is it. That is exactly it. I mean, let's just put a finer point on it. For this current Republican Party apparatus, the culture wars are not just a distraction. They are the playbook.
That's it.
And so Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they would love nothing more than for the vice president to stand on that stage and say, elect me because you will make history.
Right.
Yeah.
She's not saying that. She's saying, elect me for all of these other reasons.
Right.
Elect me because I'm decent, because I'll fight for you, because I know what needs to be done, because I respect America. She's essentially saying, elect me because I am a patriot and the other guy is not.
Yes,
And
that's exactly
what's
right.
giving people the chills.
Yes.
Because we're not having this outward you go girl moment, but all of a sudden when we least expect it, we're looking and saying, oh my gosh, our sons and daughters might live in an America where the president before them is a woman, is a black woman.
And where
no
the
one
way she
announced
got
it.
into the office is by putting an end to the political career of Donald Trump, who was the worst president in American history and who tried to overturn American democracy. And there is a person who ended it, and her name is Kamala Harris. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump. They are rooting, she then reiterated, they are rooting for Trump. They are rooting for Trump because they know he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat. I have to say, that little piece of analysis is something that almost never gets articulated that way. Instead, it gets described as something that's unbecoming or un-American seeming or puzzling. It is to have her spell it out is because he wants to be an autocrat. Then she says the line that you singled out, Lawrence. As president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand. I know where I stand and where the United States of America belongs. Saying we as Americans have inherited a global responsibility to be on the side of democracy and against tyranny, and we have been taken out of that position by this former president who is trying to put us back on the side of autocrats. I will never do that, and I will put us back where we belong as Americans, and if that's where any American in the sound of my voice believes we ought to be, then you're with me.
And that's why Leon Panetta said we have no choice. He laid that out, and just to draw a contrast tonight, what was Donald Trump doing? He was social media posting, "Where's Hunter?" And no, Tim Walz wasn't coach. He was assistant coach.
That's funny.
Okay? Well, and that's funny,
you got
but
him,
it's
buddy.
not. Right? It's devastating when you look at that. So people would say, was this speech perfect? Look at who she's running against, right? Darkness and fear, optimism and light. And that's what she offered tonight. Not just optimism and light, but real policy and vision for the country.
I really loved, just on that point that you just made, Rachel, I really love the line about the greatest privilege being an American. Because I think there's something really subtle and nuanced and smart about that. It is full-throatedly patriotic. I believe that 100%. But it also comes with, like, the notion of, the people have attacked this sort of liberal notion of privilege. But, like, it is a great privilege to be an American. It's the greatest privilege. We all won the natural lottery. People come from across the earth to be here. And to put it in those terms is at once patriotic and also progressive in the way, because it forces you to recognize the fact that we all who have been born here have been handed this thing that we have something to do with. And I loved that.
To uphold the awesome responsibility that comes with the greatest privilege on earth, the privilege and pride of being an American.
I mean, at a strategic level, I think that she soared into this role where a lot of people watching get that she's already doing all these things, and that at a national security level, she's the safe bet. She honors our alliances, and it really is. There's some serendipity, right, that she had this large role, that she is the one who went over and met with Zelensky, that she is the one that even the Wall Street Journal is reporting was instrumental in this hostage release and prisoner swap. But it's sort of to Lawrence's point. She was already ready to do the job. She told the whole country she's doing it. I think the other strategic piece that she sort of closed the door on is pushing Trump way out of the mainstream. And Kinzinger helped, and Panetta helped, and that stage full of gorgeous veterans, Gallego. I mean, I really keep going back, because I have to say, we kind of looked at the rundown and we were like, how do these pieces fit together? Well, what are they? And you look at it after her speech, and they were pushing him out of the mainstream of U.S. foreign policy, the mainstream of any past commander-in-chief that has ever held that office in the history of the country, not just a Republican that's out of the mainstream, but any person who's ever had the privilege of being the commander-in-chief. He's so far out of the mainstream of his own, and then Kinzinger comes in and pushes him way out of the mainstream of his own party, and so the only patriotic thing to do is to vote for Kamala Harris.
But Nicole,
you've been reading, the language you've been reading is so beautifully simple. There's not a high school kid in America who wouldn't understand every single thing she said. And I've never heard a Democratic speech in this setting that is as simple as that. There's always something that gets a little bit jargony, a little bit into, you got to know two more things about the federal government to understand that sentence. It's the clarity of it, and then her delivery of it, just absolutely flawless, making it even more clear. She said repeatedly, "Let me be clear." And afterwards, she was clear. And when you think about Donald Trump, who gets questions by reporters and never answers the questions and has never been clear about a single issue ever, except his desire to raise taxes on everyone through tariffs. That guy who's never clear. There she was being flawlessly clear all the way through on every policy that she was describing.
But the clearest thing was her assignment, because she ends by telling America, let's get out there and fight for it.
Yeah.
And what you said, Nicole, that, you know, we know that she's already doing all this. What we needed in these 4 days was the reminder that she is, because people often forget what she's doing.
Yeah.
People don't think about the VP. So over these last 4 days, we're reminded all the places she's been, all the things she's done, and people will say, we want this and more, and they're saying, what in the world is Donald Trump doing? Because he hasn't articulated any clear mission or message.
Yeah, and Chris, thank you for...
I'll do my second sports analogy in my entire career at this desk. I think we're seeing the backup quarterback becoming the starting quarterback.
Yes.
And when you're the backup quarterback and you run 3 plays a game, or we don't really know what you can do, but you're an NFL quarterback, right? So maybe, and now here she is. She's the starting quarterback. That's the way she can play.
Chris, I want to thank you also for the reminder about what the parallel speech was at the RNC. I mean, I had blocked it out, but he did go on for 90 whatever minutes just talking about like Hannibal Lecter and sharks or what. I mean, it wasn't sharks that night, but just the random riffing on stuff that popped into his mind in the moment while people drifted out of the room. I mean, contrast that with what we just saw.
But that's why Jacob said, right? I was at the RNC, and when Jacob was saying this was a totally different ending, I was thinking, what is he talking about? There was a lot of celebration, but not at the end. Because at the end of the RNC, people had they were exhausted, and those last 15 minutes, people were kind of backing up, like, is he going to notice I'm leaving? So when those balloons came down,
it was like
people were like, I'm out of here.
Yes.
The celebration was in the Hulk Hogan hour, not in the Donald Trump hour.
Governor Wes Moore of Maryland is at our camera in Chicago with Alex and Joy. I'll give it to you guys. Take it away.
What a thrill. I mean, first of all, can I just say, I can't imagine 2 better people to be sitting here with you know, Wes, one of the things, Governor, one of the things that the Vice President talked about tonight that really struck me was this notion of family, not by blood, but by love.
Yes.
And it really feels like Joy and I have been talking about a family reunion here. And what has it been like to be in this Democratic family?
It has been so beautiful because you see, not only is there so much joy that we're feeling right here and excitement, but also there's an eagerness to work.
Yeah, purpose.
You know what I mean? Like everybody's having a good time, but you know what everybody's ready to do? Everybody's ready to go home and get to work.
Yep.
Like everybody has their battle plan. Everybody already has the 15 people who they're going to contact, who are going to contact the 10 people that they're going to have to contact as well. So it's like we're leaving here with orders. You know what I mean? And that actually feels really good.
But loving orders.
Loving orders. Loving orders. Like, this is what we're going to do, respectfully, but this is what we're going to need you to do in order to actually make this thing happen. So it feels really good. This has been a celebratory environment, but let's be clear, people here are on a mission.
Yep.
They understand the
They want to
assignment.
get invited back to the next family reunion.
There you go.
They got work to do.
There you go.
And I mean, we've been talking a lot about the way that everyone, I guess, in this convention has really sort of reconceived kind of the idea of family and sort of how it's created, the idea of masculinity, the idea of motherhood. That's been a huge theme here. And you, I think, have done something like that in Maryland, because, you know, every time that we go on your gram, you on there with your kids or somebody dancing around and having fun. I mean, but you don't like separate. You don't feel the need to sort of portray something artificial.
No.
You're like willing to let us in to the family.
That's exactly
and
right.
That feels like a new kind of politics that actually seems to resonate inside the Democratic Party. A lot of people are doing that. That seems to be the new way the Democratic Party is operating.
And honestly, it's just authenticity.
Yeah.
It's just people want people to be themselves. And listen, our lives are complicated. Our families are complicated. There's nothing clean or easy about, you know, how we work. And I tell the story, and it's true. I had to convince members of my family to vote for me. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's a tough family reunion.
No, I'm like, they're like, so what? But it's like, but it's not that my family and I are uncool. It says I actually had to convince them to vote.
Oh, to vote.
Got it.
Period.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, our families are complicated.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We love them all the same. We fight for them all the same. And I think that's part of the message that's coming out of here. This facade that oftentimes people want to put about what is America and what does America symbolize and who is worth fighting for and who is not worth fighting for and who are the deserving and who are the undeserving. We're basically saying, guys, we are complicated. and we're all worth fighting for. So let's not forget that.
Setting your family and the tough sell aside for a second, what has so animated the Democratic caucus and the Democratic Party for so long is a sort of negative incentive, right? Like Donald Trump is this looming existential force that could destroy American democracy. And certainly that was very much part of the vice president's remarks tonight. Yeah. But there's also this extraordinary turn the party's made towards positive incentivizing, right? Like, everything's changed in terms of the general emotional dynamic of this race. It was like, you have to vote because everything's over otherwise.
That's right.
But now it's, you have to vote because what awaits you on the other side is joy in the morning, as Reverend Sharpton said over and over again, joy in the morning.
That's right.
And joy in the evening as well.
That's right.
But you know what I mean? Like, that's a very interesting change inside the party.
I remember when we were going through our gubernatorial race, I was running against an election denier. Right, I was running against a Donald Trump endorsed, Joe Biden is not the legit president type of candidate. But when we were on the trail, I wasn't spending much time talking about how backwards and absurd his policies were. I was spending my time saying, guys, if we could actually get this election right, imagine what we can do. So it's actually saying, it's basically saying, let's move towards our dreams instead of just being afraid of our nightmares.
Yeah.
Let's actually sleep easy. I would rather sleep easy if I'm looking forward to my dreams than I'm just hoping not to have a nightmare. And that's what we're asking the American people to do right now.
Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, one of the most extraordinary voices in this, really, I mean, just convocation of extraordinary voices. And just, can you guys see the stars and hearts shooting off his face in terms of positivity?
It's the Avengers. Like the Democrats have assembled the Avengers.
Yes.
It is.
Time.
I understand why it's a good family reunion. Governor, thank you for spending a little time with us. Thank you for everything that you're doing for the party.
Thank you.
Back to you.
I will say, if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are elected, I'm looking forward to the introduction of the cabinet. I'm just going to say that right now. You will remember where you
Marylanders are like, stay away from our governor. They're literally like, don't even talk about it. Don't even think about it.
That's right. That's right.
He's like, I got
Marylanders are like, no.
I look forward to hearing who I'll be working with as the governor of Maryland.
Clip and save. That's all I'm saying. I will collect later on this. All right. You will remember where you were when you heard this speech tonight from the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, really introducing herself to the nation, speaking as much to Republicans and independents as she was to the Democrats who were nominating her tonight, asking Americans to remember how great their country is and to fight for its values. You're going to remember where you were on this night. This is an inflection point in history.
As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. And I would often explain this to console survivors of crime, to remind them no one should be made to fight alone. We are all in this together. And every day in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people. And to be clear, my entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth. I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
Vice President Kamala Harris accepting her party's nomination for president last night at the Democratic National Convention. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Friday, August 23rd. Along with Willie in Chicago at the DNC and Joe and me, we have the host of Way Too Early, White House Bureau Chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire. NBC News and MSNBC political analyst, former U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill, president of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton.
What a speech.
Who spoke last night. It was incredible. We'll get to that. Also with us, professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr., and Rogers Chair in the American Presidency at Vanderbilt University, historian John Meacham. So we begin. Your thoughts?
Let's begin. I thought that she did exactly what she had to do. I thought the convention went better than I've seen it go. And Willie, I must say that again, even in that line, that punch line right before you accept your party's nomination, she talked about the greatness of America. She talked about the very things that Republicans used to talk about until they started running down America, saying what a horrible country it was. Donald Trump saying what a failed country it was, what a nation in decline it was. She went there, and I thought, really, most importantly, the Democratic National Convention went there all week with chants of USA, with flags waving, with one speaker after another going on and on about how great America was and how this could only happen in the United States of America.
Yeah, in what Vice President Harris called in her speech the greatest country on earth. And you're right, Joe, being in this arena last night, the flags got bigger as the night went along. So everyone had a small flag in their hand to wave the speech, and then they brought out the big flags for Kamala Harris's speech, chants of USA, patriotism fully reclaimed, a focus on the military, on veterans also last night. And her speech was, this building has seen a lot, Joe and Mika. Michael Jordan won 3 championships in here. They've had some electric nights. But I would hazard to guess that this was right on par with some of those nights in terms of energy in the building, John Lemire. And you and I were watching. We got sort of the full scope from Section 315 up there, looking down at this tableau of a party that has truly been energized and in some ways over the last month or so transformed from its dread and despair that Joe Biden was too old and that they were going to lose to Donald Trump and how are we going to deal with this guy for another 4 years, to a party now at the end of this week that truly feels, not in an overconfident way, truly feels it now has the upper hand.
Yeah, we were up in the cheap seats, but it gave us a great view of just the diversity of the crowd, the energy of the crowd, and yes, the patriotism of the crowd. It was on full display. The red, white, and blue flags, later the red, white, and blue balloons. And this was an extraordinarily important moment for Vice President Harris. It was only a month ago that she was not here. Joe Biden was going to be the top of the ticket. And the way she has transformed this party, energized this party. And last night she set up to introduce herself in a real way to the American people. And she did so. She started with on her biography. She spoke very poetically, very movingly about her family, her mother, her community that raised her. Really, as you said, there was a real focus on national security last night, shoring up that part of her resume, sort of in some ways moving towards the middle, to reassuring those voters. She flat out said she wanted to speak to some of the Americans who hadn't decided yet, who are not necessarily in her corner just yet. We heard from former Republicans last night, again denouncing Donald Trump. Harris, the former prosecutor, deemed him an unserious man, offered a preview of the scathing attack she'll deliver at the debate in just a few weeks' time. And then I found so striking that there was not a word of the historic nature of her candidacy, not a word about her gender or her race. It was simply, this is about the country. This is about the people in this country.
Claire, you've been saying for a long time, through all the hand-wringing about should Joe Biden stay or should he step aside? And part of the concern we all heard from Democrats, and I know you heard it too, was what comes next? Can Kamala Harris really do the job? Is Donald Trump going to wipe the floor with Kamala Harris? And you've been saying from the beginning, guys, I know her. I've worked with her. I've seen her. She can do it, and she will.
Yeah, I think she showed last night that she's ready to be president of the United States. And that was really the goal. The goal was to show the country that she's tough, that she's strong, that she's ready, that she's capable, that she has the experience and the qualifications. Should I confess now that the thing that I enjoyed the most about this convention? That it was so good at all the stuff that bug Donald Trump. The production values were off the charts. Everything looked great. The timing was seamless. There was no big drama anywhere. There were no tensions. We had more stars than he had. We have better ratings than he had. All the stuff that he thinks are important, they did really well this week. And I confess that kind of gives me a grin.
Well, and he desperately, after Vice President Harris's speech, was desperately calling into TV networks. Sometimes it appeared to be sitting on some of the keys on his phone while he spoke. Called Fox News. They kind of cut him off, then called into Newsmax. Rev, a point of personal privilege here. Lemire and I were watching upstairs, and there's no cheering in the press box. But when you came on, we had to. We had to cheer for Rev. Truly a stirring speech. And when you invoked Psalms at the end and talked about the joy and the joy that cometh in the morning, this place was filled with joy last night.
Well, I think the whole theme of the campaign and the Democratic Party's convention was that we want to get out of the darkness into the joy. So I wanted to have a biblical reference to it. And I think, as Claire said, that is the spirit you felt this week. I remember as a kid, I might have been 13 or 14, the 68 riots in Chicago. The contrast, you had protests here, but they were peaceful. There were some arrests, but no real violence. And people were every day saying there was going to be disturbance. There was joy here of all races, from all regions. And I think that that's what Kamala Harris has come to represent, which I think is a huge threat to Donald Trump. Because if you can choose between joy and disaster, you'll choose joy every time.
And joy and patriotism were combined in the way I heard Bill Bradley say yesterday. Joy and patriotism combined in a way that he has not seen since Ronald Reagan in 1984, Morning in America, when he took 49 states. I will say one correction, and really quickly, here we have the front of the New York Times and also the front of the Wall Street Journal. Harris makes her case to the nation. I will say one quick correction to the psalm that, or maybe a caveat to the psalm that the Rev said so powerfully yesterday. Joy cometh in the morning, unless you are a way too early host that has to wake up in Central Time Zone.
I look that tired.
In Central Time Zone after staying up all night watching. Then joy hath come a little later in the day.
When the nap comes, that's when my joy comes.
Poor guy. Yeah. All right.